What's up, Tech the Titans? What's up, Solid Steppers? This is Miss Ward coming to you. Today I'm coming to you with David Oliva. Hopefully I pronounced his name right because I've been pronounced it wrong like everybody else. Sounded like an ignorant American, but hey, we're here. We're going to have a conversation with David today in regards to his journey in the industry and how he got to where he is today. So we're going to start out a little slow here. Why don't you share with us the journey?
Okay. Well, first, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. It's always good to see you and talk to you. Um, so I started out working with my father. So let me take a step back. Actually, my father worked with his uncle. His uncle, my grandmother's brother, he started this business in 1963, just by himself, Queens, New York, just repairing old school washing machines. I mean, at that time, the machines were like real deal, heavy duty machines. No electronics, none of that stuff. He started out by himself at 18 years old. He worked by himself for quite a long time until my father started working with him. Just the two of them worked together for good 25 years or so. 2002, when my father's uncle retired, I started to work with my father as a technician, and he trained me. I rode around with him. He taught me how to do the repairs and the business, and it was just me and him for a long time. Around 2012, 2013, started to realize, hey, maybe there could be more to this, and I decided I would like to try something new. At that time, to put it in I don't, I was, I'd already sort of mastered being a technician by that point. I've been doing it 10 years. I said, let me try. I want to try something else. I want to try something I've never done before. Let me try actually running a business. So we put together some plans. So around the same time, I had attended a regional service training, a RISTI that USA used to do back in the day. I'm sure maybe bring it back. And we had learned some stuff about how to price appropriately, just some general basic business information that we took and we put to use, and we raised our rates and we professionalized the business. And from that point, everything was just up. We had hired, had gone through the process of finding and hiring our first technician, which I just totally did wrong. The first interview we ever did, we didn't have an office. So I was interviewing people in a Panera Bread. I was meeting them at Panera Bread, which, looking back on it is just completely unprofessional, but that's what it was. I ended up hiring this kid who I should not have hired. And he just, he wasn't the right guy, which is my fault for hiring him. But I went through a couple of people till we finally found somebody who was good and who was able to learn and actually be a technician. And from there, we hired more technicians. We built up the business. One of the interesting things that happened was we were doing pretty well around 2019. We had two techs, and everything was going fairly well. In retrospect, it could have been a lot better, but for that time period, about 5 years into growing a business, it was going pretty well. But then COVID, right, like everybody else, and the two techs that we had working for us, they decided they don't want to be out on the road anymore. They're done. They don't want to do this, which was okay at the moment because there were no calls coming in. The phone just wasn't ringing at all. But then after a couple of weeks, it just got busier than it had ever been ever. And it was just me now, just doing all the calls again. What that forced us to do was rebuild the company, which looking back was a very positive event, because although it seemed catastrophic at the time, it forced us to redo everything from scratch to say, okay, we piecemealed it up to here. Now we have an opportunity to grow in a more comprehensive way, more thought out. And so we did that, and that worked out really well, and it carried us through 2020, 21, and then at that point we had 5 techs. I think we were running 5 techs. Funny thing is, and I just written something about this for Retail Observer, so it's fresh in my mind. So I want to. We had the revenue was the highest it had ever been, right? Just, I mean, off the charts. We blew away our best year by a significant amount. And I'm looking at the numbers at the end of the year, and like the profit wasn't there. Like it didn't keep up with the revenue. I'm like, well, what's going on? So we decided, we had actually come across some more classes and some more information, and we came back from ASTI that year. I came back from ASTI that year. I decided that two of the guys I had really, they weren't performing the way I wanted, so I had to let them go. Reduce the office staff. We were sort of bloated with work, which from that sort of false. I'm not thinking of the word, but everything wasn't the way I thought it was until when we looked at the papers, right? So we stepped back again, shrunk for a second time, and from there, we took that time to really plan everything out in the most comprehensive and detailed way possible. And the growth from there has been just excellent. This will probably turn out to be our best and most profitable year. We have some new contracts. We've opened up some new service areas, and that's where we're at.
Awesome. So, you are just a regular dude from Long Island, and I bet when you look back at that kid working with your dad and, figuring it out along the way, what would you tell that kid?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure there's too much I would do differently. And it's not because I did it right, but it's because I did it wrong. And I had to learn. So I have a very thick skull. I have to learn from making mistakes. Everybody can tell me, but it just doesn't go into my head until I actually experience it. So I don't know. I guess maybe I should have taken some business courses earlier in my career. That probably would have been more helpful. That's probably the most important thing. Being a great tech is not synonymous with being a great business owner. Those two things don't necessarily go together. So learning about business from people who actually know about business will save you a lot of headaches. I'll say that. That's for sure.
Well, let's talk about that kid again. Do you think you would have been able to digest that though? Just, how it is. We go through life and,
right.
when you're young, you know everything. Because now you're out on your own, you're doing it your way, you're looking at the old folks doing stuff, and your mind is antiquated. But there's some critical steps, I think, that a lot of people miss because they don't really respect the old guard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point, and kind of why I think I probably wouldn't change anything, right? Because when I finally got into some business courses, I had that experience of, oh, that's how you do that thing that I was trying to do for a year, and having that experience now coupled with some legitimate information, you have a frame of reference to work with. You know what it means. If you come in fresh with no experience and you get that business course, maybe it has no relevance to you. It doesn't mean anything. It's just abstract. So yeah, having the experience of struggling with it and then getting the business education is probably beneficial.
All right. So can you share a memorable moment or challenge you faced during the expansion process?
Well, okay. So I mean, I want to say hiring, but that everybody has, it's an impossible task, right? It never gets better. So I'll go to cash flow management, which is what we were talking about just a little while ago. When we had our best year ever and the profit wasn't there, right? And then we went into a slow period, and now our business was, quite a bit larger than it was the year before. And we didn't really have enough money set aside to carry through the slow period, which is pretty stressful. So dealing with that and figuring out how to determine how much money to put aside for the slow period, because this business, at least in the Northeast, I think it's similar everywhere, somewhat seasonal, right? For here from the middle of January to about May, there's really nothing happening, and so you have to carry through that period with some of the money you've retained from the time when it's just been extraordinarily busy. So that was the biggest struggle, and I definitely don't have it completely where I'd like it to be, but we're in the best position we've ever been so far this year, and it's because we focused on cash flow management and figuring out what we needed and when and how to make that happen.
Awesome. So I'm getting ready to ask this next question, and everybody knows, see your attorney and your CPA and your tax professional, because this is not financial advice. So
Mhm.
I have a question. Um, when you get to a certain level, you can't play with the money. It just is what it is. You know what I mean? As far as the management, and we hear about Profit First by Mike McAllowitz. Hopefully, I didn't chop up his name. Great starting area for someone that is a one-man shop. Because see, a lot of people think that people like you don't know what it is, you know, to be in that one-man, two-man position. With all the technology we have with AI, automated systems, how would you recommend a guy that's running his calls, answering his phone, because we're gonna get all into that, and trying to manage the back end? Any recommendations as far as how they should structure it, or what should be the priority? People say, should I hire another tech or a CSR first? My opinion, you need to hire a CSR, simply because someone needs to handle the phone, and hopefully it's someone you can coach and train to handle your paperwork or what have you. But what's your opinion on that, Dave?
Well, as far as who to hire first, definitely customer service, because number one, it takes the load off of you, which frees up more time to focus on other things. But also, and one of the things that we found when we finally hired our first CSR, and just to get back to your point, I do know what it is to be, one man, two man. I mean, we did it. That's what this business was for 40 years before we decided to grow. It was one man, two man, and I was in that for 10 years. So I took that struggle from being a two-man operation and figuring. So yeah, customer service for sure, because you can't be, I mean, and I've done it and I know exactly what it is, but you're in the van and the phone rings and you answer the phone, you're trying to drive and write stuff down and focus on what you're doing, or you're in somebody's house, and you do what you got to do. But when you're trying to structure something, yeah, customer service first, because it frees up more time for you to focus on just whatever else it is you need to do, whether it's service calls or focusing on the business. But also you're just missing a ton of calls. You can't possibly get all the calls that come in. And so just by hiring that customer service person, you're capturing more work, and just that one step will absolutely increase the volume of work that you bring in. And then from there, if you're looking to hire somebody else, well, now you have that work to hire somebody else.
All right. So, in your opinion, how has the industry evolved since you started, and what significant changes have you witnessed?
So, on the technical side, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious. I'm on the verge of being an old guy, right? So, I remember when when the machines were just machines and there were no electronics. There were just motors and timers, and everything was mechanical. And it's just from 20 years ago to now, the difference in technology is just enormous. It's a totally different type. I try to imagine how my grandmother's brother, my father's uncle, who started in 1963, what he would even think about to go look at, say, a Mila coffee system with a touch panel and an automatic cappuccino dispenser. Like it's such a different world as far as the technology goes, that's probably the biggest change. On the business end, I read there's these reports called IBIS World. There are these sort of business reports on different industries, right? And they look at each industry and they analyze it and give you information about it. So when I read this report on appliance repair, it was like 2018 when I read it, they described it as a mature industry, which I thought was not true, because it wasn't, and it's still not a mature industry. The industry, even now, is primarily 1 and 2 person operations. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, but in my mind, a mature industry is something that is grown and sort of corporate. And we're using that term mature, and I don't mean to put any sort of like morality behind it. It's just that as industries mature and evolve, they tend to go corporate, and we're just only really beginning to see that in this industry. It's still primarily very small businesses. I mean, the vast majority of appliance repair services are still 1 and 2 person operations. And so we're starting to see that. We're starting to see a lot of big money get invested into this industry, both with tech startups, which continuously fail at this, but eventually one of them might get it right. I don't know. And then recently it seems that there's been a huge influx of money trying to buy up small companies with, I assume, the idea of either merging them or flipping them or just putting the small business out of business in order to corporatize the industry. So I don't even think we're at that level of maturity yet in this industry, but I think we're in a transitionary period.
Awesome. Being a board member of the United Appliance Services Association, or UASA, is notable. How has your involvement impacted your perspective on the industry?
Good question. So I got involved in the organization because I saw a gap in the needs of the companies, because the industry associations were, again, generally focused on larger companies. And I saw that gap and said, there's really not much here for 1 and 2 person operations, which is ironic because it's the bulk of the industry. So that's why I wanted to get involved to, sort of help to bridge that gap. And what I've seen from being on the board is that the people that are in those positions, 1 and 2 person, whatever, less than 5, say, they really are hungry for information and they want to know how to improve. There's such a huge desire for improvement and education, but we still have a big gap there. And the people who have gotten to very, generally very large companies, they've done it largely on their own without much support from any sort of organized support system. And we're working on improving that all the time.
Well, this is why I love me some David O. It's a couple of people in the industry that I met very early on, and they welcomed me and made me feel comfortable. So we've tried to do this a couple of times, technical difficulties, but I always trusted that you find room for me, and this is me talking personally. This is why I have so much respect for you. You're considered a big dude, you know what I mean? And, you make time for me and I appreciate it. And so does the industry. So I'm saying all this to segue into this. There is a gap. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I've gone to some of those events and I'm not going to sit here and say that I felt completely welcome. You follow me? Sometimes I felt like it might be a little cultural difference. I'm not quite sure. But at the end of the day, I'm not blaming them. You follow me? Because I'm one of those people is that people have to meet people to understand experiences and understand approaches. And, the industry is changing. With the onset of the gig economy, you got the bottom feeders, which is what I call them on a daily basis, who come in and think appliance repair is a hustle and a quick lick. We're not talking about them. They ain't invited. They can get the hell out. You know what I'm saying? But then you got the people who want to build a better life. They understand America is built on the trades and small business. And, they want to do it the right way. They may not have all the resources, but they're willing to put the sweat equity in it to get to the next level, And that's what I appreciate you, David, because you're approachable. You've always been approachable. You've always had $1 million smile on your face when you were talking to me. And I've always sincerely felt your passion and respect for the industry. So I want to make sure I get that in, because I think it's important you give people their flowers. So I'm going to go into the next question. Teaching classes on running a small service company is a unique aspect of your role. What inspired you to share your knowledge in this way? I need you to go a little deeper because you're giving me the like, I'm trying to find the words and I'm trying not to allow the hood to come out. But you're giving me like the you're giving me like the I don't want to say homogenous answer, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I feel
So
like, yeah.
it's like I said, I wanted to get involved because there was that gap. I looked and I went to those, to the conferences and the events, and I said, what am I, like, what am I doing here? Like, this is great. Like, I'm enjoying it, but I don't feel like it's for me, And so I that's why I got involved. And I said, hey, at the time I didn't have the time to commit to be on the board, but I said, well, what can I do? I said, maybe I can put together a class. And the funniest thing about that, just as a short sidestep, is the first time I ever did that, I'm up there, I'm like, these people are listening to me. Like, I don't know, I don't know what I'm saying, but no, I wanted to take the things that I learned and help other people who need that information. And on the act of teaching or putting together a class or anything like that, where you're relaying the information to somebody else, it forces you to really make sure you know what you're talking about. Because if you're gonna, you think, and I tell this to everybody, you think you know something. Now try to explain that to somebody else, and it's going to really show you where the gaps in your knowledge are. So just being able to put that together and present it helps me to learn and become better. And it's always just a constant improvement. And on top of that, it's pretty cool when people come up after the class and like, thank you, that was good information, and you've helped me with this, you've helped me with that. That feels good. But I just I want everybody who's in this, because there's the people. It's funny, the people in this business, especially people who go to conferences, they are into this. This is what they do. It's almost their identity, like, and I love that. And so I want to be able to help those people in any way I can. And not only that, you make friends, and I just wanted to, I don't know, I just want to put across the information I have, and if somebody can get something out of it, then that's satisfaction for me.
Awesome. So can you describe can you share a rewarding experience you've had while mentoring or teaching others in the industry? Anything stands out?
The one thing that I always remember, there was a woman who was on, there was a voice chat program that we have that you probably know about, right? And she was part of that, and she had asked me a couple of things and this and that, and then she had messaged me, months later, saying that she was, because of some of the information I'd given her and some of the help I've given her, she was able to put together a business plan and get a loan to start her business. And she messaged me and thanked me for that, and that just was like, wow, that's really cool. And she was able to start her business, with hopefully some help from me, which I think was
That's awesome, man.
That was cool. Yeah.
So being an alumni of Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses is a prestigious accomplishment. How did this program influence your approach to business?
So I was able to get into that class through my CPA. She had mentioned it to me. She said, hey, I was part of this program, and I think you should apply for it. So I applied, and I got in. And it was pretty intense, and it was in the winter in New York, and I had to take 7 train. I don't know if you know anything about New York. You take the 7 train to Long Island City, rush hour. It's pretty miserable, especially in January. So we did that once a week, and the course is a very condensed version of a full-fledged business course that you would take in any sort of Ivy League business school. It's the best people teaching the best information, and it's phenomenal. So immediately, you start to put some of that information to use right away, but there's so much, and it's partially abstract, like I said, without the frame of reference, right? So until you start doing it, you don't have really a lot of experience with it, it doesn't really mean that much. Yesterday, I was reviewing that information. This was 5 years ago now. Yesterday, I was reviewing some of that information to help me with something I'm working on. So it's impacted my business enormously, just because it really helped with understanding the structure and some of the fundamentals and analysis, not only of the business, but of myself and how I am in the business and how what I do affects everybody else. And, ultimately the idea that anything that's wrong or not working in my business is my fault. It's not, Tom, the technician's fault that he's not a great tech. It's my fault for not training him or for hiring the wrong guy or whatever, So that was a big takeaway from that course for sure.
Awesome. With a busy professional life, how do you manage to find time for your hobbies such as backpacking and motorcycle trips with your wife?
Well, we have to, fortunate that I have the business at a point that I can sort of step away a little bit and things will still work. Not forever, but, here and there. So I'm fortunate enough that we were able to get everything to that point where we can take some time and just, go do what we have to do, or I can come home early and spend some time with the kids or whatever. But even before that stage, I found it very important to set boundaries. Like, even now, running a business of a one-person business, a 10-person business, 100, it doesn't matter. It never ends. And you could, if you don't stop it, you could just keep going forever, 24 hours a day. There's always something to do. It's never done. So unless you set a hard boundary and say, okay, that's it. At this time, I'm done. I have to be done. On these days, I'm not doing it. Because otherwise it'll just, because really, what's the point, right? Like, ideally, you have a business to improve your life, right? And if it's not improving your life and you don't see any, hope in the future of it improving your life, then what's the point? You have to set a boundary and say, this is all I'm going to do. And if it's not done, I have to set it down and come back to it when I'm ready, at least a little bit. And I understand from a 1 or 2 person operation perspective, that can be very difficult because there's just so much to do, but you'll burn out and you won't want to do it. You just won't have the motivation to continue if you don't have that time for yourself.
Yeah. Well, have your personal interests influence any aspect of your approach to business or leadership?
Well, my personal interest,
Like,
sort of. So,
mhm.
yeah, sort of. So every year, at the beginning of the year, I sort of set a theme for what I want to focus on for that year. And last year, or for 2021, I should say, because it's almost over this year. The theme was, number one, efficiency, which cash flow management fell under, but also it was time. I wanted to focus on having more time for myself, for my kids, whatever. And I had worked that into the business at that point, time for me to do what I needed to do. So that affected the business in a way. But I don't know. I think I'm at this point pretty good at keeping them separate. The business is the business, and what I do personally. And it wasn't always that way, but I've had to work towards keeping those things somewhat separate, just for sanity.
Understand. Every industry faces challenges. What do you believe are the most significant challenges in the appliance repair industry today?
Oh, that's an easy one. Without a doubt, it's hiring technicians. The thing that everybody who's a good technician knows about this business is that it's more difficult than plumbing. It's more difficult than electrical. It's more difficult than HVAC. It's more difficult than any of the trades. And if there's any other trades watching this, I'm sure they'll say, you're full of it. But it's not true. I'm not full of it. This is the most difficult trade because not only do you have to know about the appliances, you have to know at least a portion of all of those other things. And on top of that, plumbing, look, there's some innovations in plumbing, heat pumps and new codes and, okay. But plumbing really doesn't change, right? Like a pipe is a pipe, and, the terminology, like what, it runs downhill, right? I'm not going to, so that's it, right? And, not to downplay plumbing, it's a difficult job, but it doesn't change that much. For us, especially if you focus on a variety of brands, now let's say you have a dozen brands. Each of those dozen brands has a dozen different types of products they work on. Each of those products, that they build, each of those products has a variety of models. And then on top of that, those models change every few years. So you're talking about hundreds of new things every year. And so I'm saying that to get to the point of, now we have to find people who are not only capable of understanding and learning those things and doing them well, but doing them unsupervised on their own without somebody telling them, hey, you got to be here, you got to be here. You give them a schedule, but they got to show up on time. They got to do it right. They got to be neat. They got to be thorough. And it's just, that is by far the most difficult challenge in this business, is hiring and training reliable technicians. And it's not to say it can't be done, but it's hard.
Yeah. So how do you and your company navigate these challenges? And what advice do you have for others in the industry facing similar issues?
Well, I keep trying to hire experienced technicians, right? I keep, every time I need a new tech, I put the ad out, and I'm like, I know there's just not going to be a lot of guys, but I keep, for some reason, I keep trying, right? But I really think, and all of the most successful people I've spoken to who have large companies, 30, 40, 50 trucks on the road, they all say, we are training from scratch. We are finding people with the right personality and the right mentality and the right, mechanical fundamentals, and training them to be good technicians, training them in, doing things correctly. And that's been my experience as well. The people who are the best in my company are people that we've trained from scratch. And almost everybody we've ever hired that's come in with significant experience has not worked out. Bad habits or, poor skills.
Man, we know that. So, I always describe you as a modest guy, right? So how does, because you really seem real modest to me. Now, how you are behind the scenes, that's another thing. So how does your, this quality that you exude, how does that affect your leadership style? And how do you balance humility with the need for authority in business?
That's something, quite honestly, that I've always struggled with, and I continuously work on, because I don't want to create an environment where it's, like a dictatorship. And it is kind of a dictatorship in a business, right? Because what you say goes. However, you do have a team of people that you trust or should trust. And so there needs to be some level of independence and trust. So I try to create an environment where people can have what they need. I don't want to overwork people. I don't want them, burning out and leaving and going to some other company. At the same time, we have certain policies in place. All right, and that's actually the answer to the question. Is beforehand, and this is something we had to learn along the way with hiring. These policies, these things that are very important, they need to be laid out ahead of time. So when somebody comes on, the first day they're there, you go over these things and say, these are the things that we expect to be done. And, within those guidelines, you have a lot of freedom, and that's the way I like it. But these are the non-negotiable things. You have to do X, Y, Z, then that's it. There's no, if you don't do those things, then you're not going to work here. So those policies and laying them out ahead of time has been very helpful. And something we recently worked on was laying out our core values and mission statement, vision statement. Right. That I see being probably the most helpful thing going forward for situations like that, because now now that we've determined what those things are, we're able to look at that in the context of everything else that's going on and saying, all right, does this policy, does this event, does this person's behavior, does that align with the values we've laid out for this company? And if it doesn't, then it's a simple decision. It can't continue. Either that person has to leave or change what they're doing, or this policy has to change, or this thing that we're doing has to be different, or it has to stop. So, but yeah, setting things up ahead of time so you have something to reference, I think, is probably the most important thing and the easiest way to handle those situations.
Great answer, man. In my coaching, when I'm coaching a lot of guys in the business with the one-man shops or 1, 2, and 3, I think some of the most difficult things for some of the new people is understanding the importance of SOPs, standards of operations, the importance of mission statement, and the importance of KPI reports and understanding those things. I'm always telling people, look, if you can't discipline yourself and abide by your own rules, how is anybody else going to do it? And when you're out there on the road, you see yourself make a mistake, go back and look and say, okay, is this the process? And so I wholeheartedly agree with you. And we're going to be wrapping this up shortly. I greatly appreciate your time. I got about 2 more questions. Looking ahead, what trends do you foresee shaping the future of the appliance repair industry?
That's if you'd asked me that question 3 years ago, I could have given you a good answer. But there doesn't seem to be any clear trend anymore over the last few years. Every year since, and I hate to keep going back to COVID, but that's a change point. There's something changed significantly at that point. And there hasn't been a pattern. There hasn't been a recognizable pattern in the short period of time from then until now. Everything has just been all over the place. For the 20 years prior to that I was in this business, it was pretty predictable in a sense, right? And then that just stopped as far as the trends in when it's busy, when it's slow, and what you can expect in call volume. So I can't recognize a pattern at this time. We don't have enough time since then to recognize a pattern, so it's difficult to say what the trend is. Prior to COVID, the trend, at least in appliance pricing, was a downward trend in the cost of appliances, and so it seemed like high-end service was probably the future of the industry. However, in the past few years, the regular, the standard brand manufacturers, Whirlpool, GE, Samsung, LG, they've been putting out some stuff that costs a fortune. And, people will pay to fix those things. And that's sort of a reversal of that trend. To make things a little more complicated, a lot of those parts also are very expensive. And so that, so my point here is I really haven't recognized any trends over the last few years that you could say this is the direction it's heading. I think we're in some sort of transitional stage still at the moment over the last few years. And it's, anybody can predict or say anything, but I'm saying that we don't have enough data to say this thing is likely to happen or this other thing is likely to happen, because it's constantly changing. I mean, from month to month.
Okay. So let's take a close look at a couple of recent changes here in the States. R600. Okay. How has the advent of R600 affected your business? And how have you navigated that? How have you prepared your staff, your team?
Quite honestly, I don't think that's an enormous change. I really don't. Yeah, the refrigerant's different, and technically some of the equipment should be different, but the reality is you can still,
braze it,
claim or do what the manufacturer says, but you can still do a field system in the same way that you did it before, or you can use lock ring, whatever. But that's just a tool choice, right? But it's basically the same process, and I don't see that as a significant change at all. The only thing I will say is that the R600 systems seem to be a little bit easier to work on, but other than that, it's not. I don't think that's a significant change, honestly.
Well, you realize that is a confident tech talking, right? because there are a lot of guys who are scared of seal systems and they scared to death of R600. And I don't know what we can do to get people to understand is not only stay current, but stay ahead of the curve. So let's get on with the pricing. You know, we notice Frigidaire, GE, all the prices are going up on the parts. Any
Hmm.
advice on teaching these guys how to stay ahead of that? Because I hear people complaining. I'm like, well, if you're running a business, it should be passed to the customer. It's not an issue
Oh,
for me.
that's something that never made sense to me when people would say, we see a lot of talk on the online stuff, how can I find this part cheaper? And, which is fine, that's a legitimate, uh, action to take. But at the same time, it shouldn't be your sole purpose, right? Finding the cheapest part to the customer, $15. Like, you're running a business and you have to do things in the most efficient way. And ultimately, everything gets passed on to the customer. Now, you might not like that, whatever, but that's what it is. So, yeah, you can try to keep your pricing reasonable, but at the end of the day, you have to make money, or what's the point? And you not only have to make money, you have to make a lot of money because it's expensive to run a business. You need a new truck, you need, an all dolly is like what, $600 now or something, and maybe you have three trucks. Now you got to lay out $1,800 plus shipping, so the point is you have to charge a lot of money. You call a plumber, how much does it cost? Well, we were just talking about plumbing, which is a fairly straightforward concept. You
Yeah,
need a new tap under your sink. You're going to pay what, like $600-700? I don't know, some
yeah,
enormous amount
exactly,
of money for the plumber to come in for an hour or two and do that job. Why should we not be charging the same way? Art,
exactly.
in fact, maybe we should be charging even more. Now, it's hard to balance that with the cost of a new machine, understandably, but that's where you may have to look at your, the products that you're servicing and your customer base and say, well, I don't know, maybe this segment of my customer base is not really the segment I need to focus on. Maybe there's some changes I need to make in my business, or maybe I need to just say, you know what, we're not going to service this product anymore because we don't make any money on it, and it's taking up, time slot for a profitable call. And it may not see, you get stuck, especially with a smaller operation, you get stuck in saying, well, that's not fair. I need to help everybody, but at the end of the day, you need to help yourself, and it doesn't mean you do the right thing, but you do the right thing within the context of what's right for you, and you're running a business for your benefit. It's not a charity. You're not out there to help everybody solve all of their problems. You have to do what's right for your business, and sometimes that means certain people, certain customers, certain appliances are not for you, and but
I agree. I agree. Most people really don't understand the cost of doing business. Like with my business, I have a foundation and a charity arm. So when the little old lady down the street, I need to go to hook
sure.
her up like my mama taught me, then that's
Hmm.
what I do. But believe me, I'm getting a tax write-off because I'm a businesswoman
Right.
first.
And it's incorporated into your pricing. A percentage of what you
Exactly.
do is going to be at a discount or for free or whatever. And
Exactly.
but the reality is that's subsidized by your other customers, right? So they're paying a
Exactly.
little bit more. So, and that's
Exactly.
just how it works.
I
But
wholeheartedly
you
agree.
have to think about that, correct? Absolutely.
True. Now, the final, I got this last question has to do with technology. One has to do with the fact that people don't want to pay for subscriptions, and so they have
Hmm.
access to service manuals. They don't, blah, blah, blah,
Hmm.
and the other one has to do with technology. You got guys crying about not wanting to get the smart HQ. They should have had that years ago. And once the door opened for everybody to get it, you should have got it. That's my
Hmm.
personal opinion, especially when GE is sending us boards that have to be programmed on the spot, basically. Like
Right.
the industry is changing. So what do you say to those guys who just do not want to move into it?
Well, I mean, the reality is they will fail if they don't, because that's just where everything is going. And it's it's kind of a ridiculous stance to have. I don't know how else to put it. It's kind of dumb, and I'm not trying to, like, it's just, if you need a tool for your job and you're refusing to buy that tool, then you can't do your job. It's the period. Like, there's no other way to say it. If you need if you go out and you want to work, let's say you're an auto mechanic and you work on I don't know, solves or something, and I don't think they make solves anymore. You know what I mean? But let's say they have some special wrench that you need to work on that car, and I'm not buying that wrench. I'm going to struggle with this old adjustable wrench I have. Like, that's, you're a professional. You need to have the tools that you need to do the job. And to your point about cost of doing business, it's an expense. It's a business expense, and it gets incorporated into figuring out your pricing. If my subscription for this product is I don't know, $1,200 a year, then you divide that by the number of jobs you do, and you increase the rate by that much, and that's it. So you're not losing anything, and you got to have the tools to do the job. It's like a fundamental thing.
I agree. Well, do you have any final words for my Tech to Titan crew and my solid steppers? Any final words for us tonight, David?
So one of the most important lessons I ever learned from a book I read called Good to Great. Excellent book. You should read it. One of the most significant things you can do is to just constantly improve everything all the time. It doesn't matter how small. If you look at everything on a regular basis and just say, you know what? First of all, nothing I do, nothing you do, nothing anybody who's watching this does is perfect, right? It all could be improved. And so if you constantly focus on improving that all the time, you will almost definitely be successful, because now you're looking at everything and you're saying, I want to do this better, and you're constantly going to just do better. And that will put you ahead of most people.
I agree. That's a great book by Jim Collins. He discussed, you look at Eckers, where are they at? All those great companies that were great, but they were good, but they could have been great, and they just did not make changes. And that's one of the books. So it'll be in the comments here, a link for Good to Great, along with the other ones I preach about: 12-Week Year, Atomic Habits, Book Yourself Solid, and Profit First. They're all going to be in the comments, because at the end of the day, it's going to be in the description underneath the phenomenal description we'll have about David. But David, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. As always, it's always an honor and a privilege, and thank you for representing the industry the way you do. A true Tech to Titan.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
No worries, man. Thanks again. All right, y'all, let's go get it. Miss Ward is signing off, bringing you another banger. Let's go.